welcome to episode 14 of Poetry Worth Hearing, hosted by me, Kathleen McPhillamy, and with music by Alex Heen. This episode focuses on poetry and work. Most poets spend most of their lives working at jobs which are not poetry. Even those who are employed in poetry-related fields find themselves involved in administration, teaching, pitching for funds, and so on. Yet, surprisingly little is written about work, in contrast to all the poems which have been written about nature, love, death, etc. In this episode, we have an interview with Ilse Pedler, a poet and a vet, who talks about how her two vocations have fed into each other. She also gives us a reading of some of her poems. Then we have a wide range of work-related poems. Some poets, like Ilse, write directly about the work they do. Some write about the work of others. Some write about the conditions that go alongside work, such as the commute or office relationships. Poets featured include Meg Barton, Sarah J. Bryson, David Burridge, Dinah Livingstone, Roddy Maude-Roxby, Helen Overell, Philip Pollecoff, Jane Thomas, Carl Tomlinson, Sarah Watkinson, Merryn Williams, Pat Winslow, and Stephen Wren. So here is Ilse Pedler talking about her career as a poet and a vet.
So I think I first got into poetry when I was at school, and I know a lot of people have had bad experiences with learning poetry at school and have been put off it. But for me, it was a really positive experience. And I think studying for O-level English literature, it was the first time that I really understood the power of words, and particularly in poetry, that a word could hold a meaning but could also have a different meaning if you put it together with other words, and how you can create images in the mind. And I think then I realised how powerful literature could be, and in particular poetry, and I became hooked and wanted to try it for myself. Matrabandhu put it more eloquently: the great power of poetry is in its resonance. Poems resonate out from the words used in some deeper and richer meaning. So when Robert Frost finishes his famous poem Stopping by the Wood on a Snowy Evening with the repeated "and miles to go before I sleep," we all know that the first time means I've got a long way to go before I go to bed. But the second time, that something universal is being expressed about what it is to be alive. This poem resonates and you feel something larger being apprehended, even if you can't say exactly what it is. And I think that really clicked with me when I was studying O-levels. And the poets that I studied were Larkin and Ted Hughes, and just realising for the first time what a powerful thing a poem could be. I wrote poetry, poems of a sort, I guess, right from when I was then 13 or 14. I never had any of those early poems published. And, you look back on them now and you think, oh, that's a bit of teenage angst maybe. But I think it was a powerful way of expressing feelings and emotions that I was going through as a teenager as well. Then I went to university and went to vet school, and kind of life got in the way. And I had a family and owned a business, and, it was really, really busy time. And I think I got to about 45, and I kept writing these poems down on bits of paper. And I thought, I really, if I'm going to do this, I really ought to do it properly. So I went on an Arvon Foundation course, and it was just absolutely life-changing, really. It was completely mind-blowing, and the tutors were so supportive and enthusiastic, and you kind of accepted me as somebody that writes poetry. I think I came back from that week absolutely enthused, and also realising that you have to work at it as well. You can't just write a few lines down and call it a poem. You have to really work at it. So then I started really taking poetry seriously and joined a poetry group and started reading more. And I suppose the things that I wrote about were the things that I knew. So I knew about animals, I knew about working as a vet. And so I suppose it was just natural for me to think, well, that's what I'll write poems about. I'm trying to make sense of my life as a vet and the things that I was encountering on an everyday basis, what I was seeing in the consulting room and the operating theatre. I read Larkin and Hughes more widely, so I then read all their work, and Auden and Gerard Manley Hopkins was a phase as well. But then I was introduced to more modern poets at that course. So Les Murray was one, and he has a wonderful series of animal poems where he speaks from the voice of the animal. I think there's a cow one, isn't it, where he calls them me, and all me are this and all me are feeling this, because he believes that the cow is a herd animal. So it's like a collective conscious. Seamus Heaney and Don Patterson and Liz Berry, who I still love. I think her poems are so wonderful. The more you read, the more you're introduced to other poets, aren't you? And then reading poetry magazines and seeing newer poets come through. So I think the poets that I admire now, or the poets that I go back to, I guess, would still be Liz Berry, and then going on to Kim Moore, who's a wonderful Cumbrian poet, but other poets that have become more prominent just in the last few years. Jane Byrne has just got out this fantastic first collection, Be Feared. I'm really fortunate to be part of a poetry group called the 57 Collective, and that was started by Alice Willits in Cambridge, and she invited a group of poets, and we meet up once a month on Zoom to do a workshop. And there's people like Chaucer Cameron, Jess Mukherjee, Cheryl Mokovitz, Elvia Roberts, and several other people. And just reading their work is amazing. There's Stav Polleg, who also lives in Cambridge. She writes the most amazing cinematic sort of filmic poems, which are full of these beautiful images, often about the city or painters. So just reading widely, I think, is really important, and being introduced to new poets in poetry magazines. I really love the Rialto. I read that one very regularly. Magma is also brilliant. But there's just so many, aren't there? Finished Creatures, Butcher's Dog. If I read you one of Jane Byrne's, she's the most amazing person, and she has a wonderful reading style as well. I was fortunate to hear her read at the Kendal Poetry Festival last year, and she has such a love of words, love of language, and the way she uses words. So this one is Triolet for Easter and the icon I have made of a wizened rabbit's pelt. And she explained that she, on her daily walk, saw this dead rabbit, and for most of us it would be, a put off, and but she felt drawn to it and kept going back to it, and this is the poem that came out of it. This journey around your folded bones, your mess of meagre limbs, becomes a necessary crusade. Each day I must repair your salter of wounds, rotate you so that each eye has equal sight of the sky's smalt scrim. This journey around your folded bones, your mess of meagre limbs, ends with my kneeling at your reliquary of grass. The parchment of your skin waits like a page to be written with colours of God. Once blood bloomed and made its journey around your folded bones. Your mess of meagre limbs becomes a necessary crusade each day. I must repair your salter of wounds. I know a lot of people feel very conflicted about their work and the time it takes up in their lives. But I think most veterinary surgeons maybe will have chosen a career because of an emotional connection or empathy with a particular animal at some point in their early life. And so I think there's a sort of almost a deeper connection before it starts with a vet. And I think it becomes a vocation rather than a job. And I think being a vet is so tied up with who I am and what I do that it's so difficult to separate it, really. So I can't really separate my job from who I am. And it is all encompassing, really. And certainly 30 years ago when I first qualified, it certainly was. You were part of the community, the farmers invited you in for, breakfast, cup of tea, and you'd see people in the supermarket and they'd chat about their animals. So you were never not a vet, if that makes sense. So yeah, it's so bound up with who I am and who I was that I felt I wished I had a little bit more time, and I would often feel a little bit frustrated that I didn't have enough time to write. But then I think if you need to write, you'll just write in some way. And I remember pulling up in a lay-by in my car on the way to a visit and finding a scrap of paper and scribbling some lines of a poem on a scrap of paper because they'd just come to me in the car. And there's one poem actually that was in my the pamphlet that is about operating on a dog that was involved in a road accident, had a ruptured diaphragm, and I had to repair this ruptured diaphragm, and it was actually seeing the heart through the remnants of the diaphragm. And as I was stitching it up, it's not to say I wasn't concentrating on the job in hand, but as I was stitching it up, I was just thinking how amazing it was to see this heart beating in the chest cavity, and that how many people are privileged enough to see that in real life. And so some lines of a poem actually came to me while I was doing that surgery. And as soon as I'd finished the surgery, I came out of the operating theatre, found the back of a consent form, I think, and scribbled on the back of the consent form these little lines of poetry that had come into my head during the operation, and then had to stop and obviously do the clinical notes and the aftercare. And I think, was it Larkin that said, I write to preserve what I've thought, felt or seen. And I think for me that's true. I write about what I know and what I do and incidents that have affected me. But I think I also write to make sense of things, to kind of work through them. I know in my collection Auscultation that there's a section at the end about being a stepmother, and certainly a lot of that was working through, how I felt about that and things that went on at that time. It's interesting, when I started writing poetry seriously on that Arvon course, I certainly went on the course with a bit of a sort of imposter syndrome, thinking, I'm not really a poet. I'm a vet. I don't feel that I belong because I haven't done a degree in English literature, or I didn't do English A level. I wasn't allowed to because I had to do the science A levels because I knew I wanted to be a vet. So I always felt almost like I was a bit of an imposter, or that I wasn't equipped to be a poet because I hadn't studied it enough. And I think that was probably a scientific take on it. If you haven't studied it, you don't have a full understanding of it. So I think I spent a lot of the first, perhaps 5 or 6 years thinking, I don't know enough. I can't possibly be a poet because I don't, haven't studied all these things. But I think if you read and you more you write and the more you read, the more familiar you become with things. And going on writing workshops and going along to poets' meetings and poetry groups and taking your poems along to be critiqued, I think is a really important part of the process. And for me, that was essential. And I belong to a couple of poetry groups in Cambridge who are fantastic and, really helped with that evolution into being a poet. I remember being at one workshop and somebody said to me, "Oh, isn't it wonderful that you're a vet as well as a poet?" And I thought, "Oh, okay, that's interesting." I'd always felt a bit of an imposter. And they said, "Oh no, but you've got this other language, haven't you?" And I suddenly thought, "Oh, okay, yeah, that's true. I've got a medical language, and those medical terms often find their way into my poems." And so I then came to think of it. Oh, actually, that could be an advantage, really, rather than a disadvantage. I think vets are very used to, we spend a lot of our time reading and writing clinical notes. And there are observations of the patients, and they're often factual, but they're also not always dry and clinical. They're a record of what we've seen, felt, heard, or smelt, even when you're examining an animal. And medical language is full of colour and dimension, and it's very particular, but it's very strong and language as well. And we observe our patients closely, and we record what we feel about them. And the attention to detail is paramount. And I think that's what we use as poets as well, don't we? We use precise and descriptive language. And I think a lot of vets are perfectionists. And I think that's quite helpful, often being a poet, because you go back over things and, you really want to get it right. I think for me, that was another important thing. Another thing that I loved about poetry was this kind of jigsaw or puzzle effect of putting the right pieces together and making it work. And I'm sure as all poets do, the feeling that when you're searching for the right word or the right phrase and you can't get it, and then all of a sudden it comes and it clicks and you go, "Oh yes, that's it, that's what I was trying to say, that's what I was trying to get." So I think for from being at a disadvantage now, I actually feel that it has been an advantage having that language and having that clinical practice of observation and recording what I'm seeing and hearing. And so I think it has been, as I say again, it's difficult to separate the two things. I can't not be a vet in the same way as I can't not be a poet anymore, I suppose. I went to Cambridge Vet School and then worked for 30 years in a practice in Saffron Walden. And it started off as a mixed practice, so farm animals and companion animals, and then eventually became just companion animals. I actually retired from that practice in 2020 and moved to Cumbria. And now I'm kind of semi-retired now, so I just run a very part-time practice in complementary therapies for animals. So I do acupuncture, herbs and homeopathy and advice on supplements and so on. So there's a lot of demand out there for not alternative, but different ways of looking at animal health. I mean, the idea of retiring from general practice and moving to a place we loved would be to spend more time writing. And so I'm now able to write every day, or most days anyway, which is brilliant. And Cumbria has got an amazing poetry scene. There's Kim Moore and Polly Atkin and Katie Hale, who's just had her first collection published, White Ghosts, which is brilliant. Jennifer Copley, and there's a really strong poetry group of brewery poets in Kendal. There's the Dove Cottage Poets, of course, in Grasmere, and I'm actually helping to run that now, which is lovely. And there's such a nice group of people there. And then the other thing that was really important with moving to a new place was I'm also a Morris dancer. It was also important to check out what the local Morris dancing side was like. And thankfully they are brilliant as well. Crook Morris are absolutely brilliant. I was lucky enough to win the Mislexia Poetry Pamphlet competition in 2015. And Amy Wack was the editor at Seren at that time, and I was lucky enough that she really liked my poems. So so I was the winner of that. And so Seren published The Dogs That Chase Bicycle Wheels is my pamphlet, and then Seren published my first collection, Auscultation, in 2021. And the book really is it's a collection of poems about my experiences as a veterinary surgeon on some of the animals and people and situations I've encountered in my career. But it also contains poems about my parents, death of my father, becoming a mother and a stepmother. And the recurring theme throughout the book really is listening or being listened to or not being listened to. And so for me, auscultation is the medical term for listening to sounds of the body cavity, normally the heart, chest. And it just was so right that should be the title.
And now Ilse reads a selection of her poems.
Yeah, I can read you the poem about the ruptured diaphragm. I think that's a good one to start with. So it's called Suturing Secrets. And as I say, it's about when I was operating on a dog and felt this huge privilege at being able to see this heart beating behind this sort of torn diaphragm, but also the slight revulsion that the muscle, because it's a muscle contracting in the end. So this is the poem that came out of that surgery. Suturing Secrets. We are divided into compartments, separated by taut membranes, glistening planes of connective tissue, resilient boundaries. Today this is damaged, anaesthetised, surgically explored. Your diaphragm is a torn curtain hanging, and like a peep show, I am drawn to look behind. In the absence of pressure, lungs hesitate to inflate, do their best to conceal the frantic convulsions at your core, the struggle for rebirth every second. I look perhaps longer than I should at the shuddering flesh, the labouring beauty. Then I pull the curtain back over and suture the secret inside. Talking about the medical language, actually also in the pamphlet, there is another poem called Breaking the Code, and that uses some of the medical language that I learned, and also sort of touches on the difficulty of the veterinary course. And it's a very intense course. So it's called Breaking the Code. Polydipsia, polyphagia, means too often. We explored the sounds, our tongues speculating tentatively as we scribbled down each new word, not meeting each other's eyes. Tachycardia, tachypnea, means too fast. Some started dropping the words into conversation. I watched the ripples spreading, but waited until I could be sure I could leave the surface like glass. Dysuria, dysgeusia, means too hard. I had expected it to be easier. The poem that I often start a reading with is called Visit to the Vets. And I always say that being a vet has been a huge privilege, and I feel very blessed to have that as a career. And I certainly haven't had those moments of hating. Well, I have had moments of hating being a vet, I suppose, but not for the fact of the job, for the fact of things that have happened to animals or to people. But the consulting room is a privileged place, I think. All of life is there. You get to see the highs and the lows, the lords and ladies. I've treated animals belonging to rock stars, but I've also treated animals belonging to homeless people and bankrupt people and people with mental health issues, people that have just been recently bereaved. And so you see all of life, and just seeing that and witnessing that makes you realise there's more to life, and it makes you understand life more, and you have to be able to help people in all sorts of situations. So yeah, this is the poem that came out of that, and it's called Visit to the Vets. I'm listening when I say, "How are you today?" I'm listening when I tilt my head just so. I'm listening when I say hello to Fluffy, Sooty or Rex. I'm listening when Rex pees up the door. I'm listening when you get a text and text back. I'm listening when you let your kids climb on the table. I'm listening when you answer your phone and say, "I'm in the vets, I can't talk." I'm listening when you carry on talking. I'm listening when you say, "I can't put my finger on what's wrong." I'm listening when you say, "But I know he's just not right." I'm listening when you say you've looked it up on the internet. I'm listening when you say, "Are you sure?" I'm listening when he growls and you say, "Don't worry, he won't bite you." I'm listening when he tries to bite me. I'm listening when you start telling me about your other dog. I'm listening when I've heard the same thing 5 times already. I'm listening when I plug my ears with the stethoscope. I'm listening when you say, "Your job must be so interesting." I'm listening when you say, "You vets are all rip-off merchants." I'm listening when you snap at your partner. I'm listening when your kids go quiet and hold hands. I'm listening to the sound of your self-importance filling the room. I'm listening as your opinions start polishing their firearms. I'm listening to the emptiness of your wallet in the silence. I'm listening as your dead husband stands behind you, putting his overcoat around your shoulders. There's a couple of poems in the book about the difficult parts of being a vet. And one of those difficult parts is the euthanasia aspect of it. It is a difficult thing to do, and it's never taken lightly. And it's a very emotional time for obviously the owner, but also the vet. And it's one of those things that's also not taught particularly well at vet school. It certainly wasn't in my day. It wasn't taught at vet school. I'm sure it probably is taught much better now, but you were just expected to do it and get on with it. And it's quite a huge thing to do. That taking of a life is a huge thing to do. And, you don't get to people don't get to make that decision generally. And, but as vets you do. And it got me thinking about other professions where you kill for a living, which is a horrible thing to have to do, but slaughtermen and hangmen and other people that have to do that thing, and how do you cope with that? So this is the poem that came out of it. and it's Teach Me to Kill. Sit me down on a wooden bench and let me hear the scream of chalk on blackboard. Draw me diagrams and flowcharts. Give me a slate and pencil and instruct me how to scratch them out. Give me homework, printouts and worksheets that I can strike through with my coloured pens. Indicate the important bits, the bits I'll be tested on at the end of term in the multiple choice question paper, along with my fellow students, the hangmen, the slaughtermen, the ones who draw up lethal injections, who strap people to gurneys, sit in the chair to test the restraints, the ones with the electric paddles or captive bolt, and the ones who hover in the doorway, who aren't officially here, who just turn up the drip. They won't be taking the exam. You won't find this course in any prospectus or other promotional material. It is advertised by word of mouth. Teach me to kill in the smallest lecture theatre with the unmarked door. Teach me the tricks of the trade, how to kill and then carry on. I think the poems that I'm writing now are still veterinary poems, and they're still using the language of veterinary medicine. I don't think I'll ever stop using that, because it's sort of, it's so embedded in me. The poems that I'm working on now are poems about the body, both animals' bodies and human bodies, how we change them, how things are changed without permissions, how we manipulate bodies, and how detrimental that is to some animals. One of the things that particularly bothers me, I think, is how we've bred dogs into different shapes and how we've manipulated their bodies, often to the detriment of their health. And so, for example, short-faced dogs, pugs and Pekingese and bulldogs, and become quite popular breeds. But as vets, we see a lot of the problems in that they can't breathe. They just literally can't breathe properly. And Dachshunds with very, very long backs, for example, and they often have slip discs because their backs are so long and there's so much pressure. And there's lots of other examples of where we've bred these traits into animals that have become health concerns for them. And there's a lot of talk now about how we can reverse that breeding process. And there's a lot of work being done with the Kennel Club trying to change some of they're called breed standards. So every breed has a breed standard that's written down by the Kennel Club. And I think people have become overzealous with trying to adhere to those breed standards. So they say long back and they've made them longer and longer and longer, for example. So I think the Kennel Club is doing quite a lot of work to try and reverse these changes. But it is a problem, and those are some of the things that are concerning me now. So I can read you one of the newer poems that I've got about that. And this is about this issue of dog breeding. And it's called, Is There Still Something Wolf? A wolf crests the dusk of the horizon, regards the valley below, throws back its silver-furred head, opens its throat, hurls a howl into the cavity of the sky. Listen. Bedrooms, kitchens, kennels, sofas, ears twitch, DNA pricked by faint griefs of memory. Is there still something wolf in your beating hearts, your wolf eyes, your wolf stomachs? You lift a sightless blue eye, suck in air through pinched nostrils, pull oxygen through narrowed windpipes. Struggle to rise on your two short legs, twisting your two long backs. Figure, it's not worth the effort. Settle. Oh, look, he's dreaming. Dream on, man's best. You abased yourself at our fires. We gave you food, shelter, and so much more as your reward. Only right we extract our fee from your genealogy. Make you various. Make you diverse. Blueprint you. Head relatively large in proportion to body, skull nearly flat between ears, domed forehead, lower jaw deep, square, broad, slightly undershot and turned up, pricked ears highly undesirable, loose skin, frowning expression, harsh bristly coat, tail short, rolled, curled, or stumpy from birth. The wolf lowers its head, turns, walks silently back into the forest. What did you expect? Come, slip on a tutu, paint your nails, dance for us.
Thank you, Ilse. You'll find more about Ilse and details of her publications on poetryworthhearing.biz, where you can also see information about the other poets, as well as texts of previously unpublished poems. Our first poet, Sarah J. Bryson, has also written about a career which could be described as vocational. These poems come from a sequence about her training as a nurse.
Early shift, winter. Flakes like goose down float without purpose through the glow of the sulphur streetlight over the garden wall as you unlock the shed to disentangle your blue rally bike from the others. You're bundled up in your coat with a thick scarf and gloves, ready for the descent of Headington Hill through town to the infirmary. The cold stings your face. The dynamo whirs as it rubs on the rim, gives out a flicker to show how the snow settles a layer of white over the black tarmac. You control the freewheel, gently braking, your mind focused on not slipping, on getting there in one piece, the thought of cycling back at the end of the shift, uphill all the way, already weighing on your mind. Observation rounds. Post-op obs, quarter hourly, reducing to half, then hourly, done routinely, depending on the surgery, using manual sfigs and communal stethoscopes, mercury thermometers popped under the tongue, pulses palpated for 15 seconds, eyeing the footwatch, quick in the head 4 times calculations, all noted on charts, clipboarded at the foot of the bed, respirations unless alerted by wheeze, stridor or cough, often ignored or guessed. 1 round finished, time to start the next. Not just the obs nurse, it's not enough. Check the wound, make sure you look at the actual patient. General student on psych placement. This elderly, emaciated man was so weak and bony thin, wanted to stay in bed if he could. Alcoholic, they said, with a chronic wound. One for you perhaps, as you know something about leg ulcerations. We had convoluted discussions, confabulations, they said. He had a recipe for Campbell's soup and poached egg, which he claimed makes a decent lunch with good cheese in times of need. I did try it just once. He told anecdotes about acting with Olivier and Dench, gave his thoughts on the correct cooking of potatoes and the importance of poetry. After negotiations of timing and his need for pain relief, he'd let me rebandage his leg while he quoted his favourites. I had Wordsworth and R.S. Thomas and swathes of Shakespeare, a little of the Shropshire Lad. The charge nurse commented one day, after I'd been away, that no one else had been permitted to do this dressing. That morning I went to his room and he complained his leg had been left too long and stenched of flowering ivy, was leaking green through the padding. No negotiations needed that day. Afterwards he said he had something for me, a little gift. I told him I'm not supposed to accept it. It's against the rules. He told me it's not worth much. I checked with the staff nurse. Take it, she said with a shrug, if it makes him happy. It was a small green hardback, the Golden Treasury, with the dedication to She who dressed my wound with thanks, taped in the front with his card. The sellotape's gone stiff and yellow now, after more than 40 years. Acceptance. When I arrive, his wife says, I know he's dying. It's been coming to this for a while, but now he has reached the reality of it, a changed man who is diminished in size, whose bones push at the skin, who rambles a little when he wakes, then asks for a drink but can't manage to sip, who plucks at the sheets, doesn't like the light, whose breath is more erratic. His wife is trying to stay strong, holding things together, and the daughter is taught, walking a tightrope, fearing the fall, not knowing what will happen next, what to do, how long this may go on, the wanting it over quickly, mixed with the wrench of not being ready. Later, when he's more settled and dusk seeps in, his wife asks me to call her Mary and her daughter Sue. She puts on the bedside lamp and Beethoven. He knows what's coming, they tell me. He wants a cremation, not burial. He's updated his will. They show photographs of his life, tell how, in his day, he used to coach the rugby and rowing. His pride in this, their pride shows in the telling. There are tears and laughter. A pause. Sue asks about the undertaker, wants to know if they can leave his wedding band on his ring finger when he goes to the creme, so that it can stay forever with him.
And next, still in the field of medicine, this elegiac poem for his daughter by Stephen Wren.
This is a poem written about my daughter's training as a junior doctor. Husks at dusk. I am thinking of the back of your head. I am thinking of the gold in your hair. I hold these coatings of seeds in my hands. I am thinking of the skill in your hands. I am thinking of the mind that made you. I watch the fading light paint walls at dusk. I am thinking of the job of your dreams. I am thinking of the speed of your mind. I search for what is hiding inside seeds. I am thinking of the work you have done. I am thinking of the calm in your voice. I know that pennies can drop when it's still. I am thinking of the sick you made well. I am thinking of your life that was work. I get to the kernel of what matters. I am thinking of the gold of your soul. I am thinking of the pride in my heart. I thank God that I am your dad this night.
Alan Buckley works as a psychotherapist. These poems come from his book Touched, which was published in 2020.
This first poem is called Things Can Only Get Better, which is the title of a song by the band D-Ream, which was used by the Labour Party during their campaigning in the 1997 election that took them to a landslide victory. And at that time I was working in a therapeutic community, a kind of halfway house for people coming out of psychiatric hospital. And yeah, I was about 4 years into my career in mental health work. Things can only get better. Though the buildings long since demolished, the land redeveloped, let's pretend we can walk back through the yellow dining room into the garden, each of us carrying a mug of sweet tea. You with your Spa own brand Super Kings, me with my tin of Golden Virginia. We sit cross-legged on the grass, t-shirt weather. We're in the pink cloud of New Labour's honeymoon, the memories fresh, that song blaring out at a fist-pumping rally, that winsome, winning smile. A new dawn has broken outside number 10. And now those images flooding our TV screens. A dead princess in an underpass. Kensington Palace adrift on a sea of flowers. A country at ease with showing its tears, the old ways losing their hold. We draw on our cigarettes and exhale, hazing the late summer air. It seems like nothing lies out of reach. We talk about ordinary stuff, what you might go on to do one day. Study, get a job, even have your own family. Leben und arbeiten, das ist alles. And who cares if Freud never actually said this? Ordinary stuff, as if the years to come were blank pages in a journal that we might fill however we wanted. As if the hand has no compulsion to write what it's written before. This second poem, Moonlight, also dates from my time working in residential mental health in the mid to late 1990s. And obviously there are many experiences I've had during my career in mental health and as a therapist that at one level I would love to write about, but I am at the same time obviously constrained by the need to protect the identities of the people I've worked with, which is something that this poem talks about. Moonlight. Although I've invited you here to join me in this poem's little room, I can't speak your name. I'm bound as tightly as a priest who draws the curtain aside and steps out onto the cool stone floor. So I must clip my tongue and do no more than point towards the absent care and many hurts, the desolate unhealth they left you with. Instead, I'll speak the heart of you, held in a single photograph. You just turned 19. On house holiday, staff and residents together. Front seat of the minibus, dark green anorak over gym jams, cigarette tucked between your fingers, fringe flicked clear of your eyes. And yes, that waxing crescent moon of a smile, full of promise. Give me another chance, it beamed, and always I succumbed, being merely human.
Now, 4 poems from Pat Winslow. 3 relate to her experience of working in prisons, where the relationship with the institution is perhaps more problematic. The 4th reflects her work as a humanist celebrant.
Strangeness in reverse. Of all the things I'm warned about, this one sticks. We never let anyone walk out alone. It's the keys. So I'm expecting strangeness to happen in reverse. My first week, the weight of an iron gate, the swing of it, the clang when I let it go too hard against the frame, how 4 inches of thick brass warms up in the palm, the silver chain that's never still, the whistle. But no, handing over the keys is easy. Even the goodbyes, the suddenness of tears is comforting, the clasp of hands and, on occasion, arms. So not the parting. And I've long ago lost the ability to be shocked by birds flying over the perimeter fence. I shred many things, not least the Official Secrets Act, and feel lighter for that. No one knows the itch of a secret that lies beneath the skin, how it burns to break free. Unexpectedly, it's the ID tag I hoped to keep. They take it away from me, my face shining out as it was 6.5 years ago. I am not that person. The realization bites and begins to deepen. I walk out more alone than I ever imagined. Prison scars anyone, I think. It certainly scars a prisoner, but I think also people who work in prisons are damaged in some way by it. It's a very brutal system. This next poem I wrote for Talha Hassan, who was sentenced. Well, he wasn't actually sentenced. He was imprisoned without trial for 6 years in the prison where I was working at the time as a writer in residence. And then he was extradited under Theresa May's government to the United States and put into solitary confinement. All this without a trial. And this is a poem for Talha. And it also honours his brother, who mounted a phenomenal campaign to get him released and come back to England. I am pleased to say that he is now living in the UK and working as a poet and translator. Beyond Frame. The prisoner steps into the painting his brother made for him. He knows there's no going back, that he must learn to swim through colour, trust negative space, seek a vanishing line. In time, he may decide that the cell he's leaving behind is a cube, and cubes can be undone and spread out, made flat like a net diagram. Walking in blue and orange, he'll find that parallel lines often meet, that sound travels best by pen and ink. Nothing is more profound than the silence of green, he'll think. And though he might not see his brother, he will on occasion hear him sing. He'll recognise the familiar scent of his skin, which is not unlike his own. Today, stepping out into the light, he is stripped clean. He is his brother's breath without weight. Nothing can detain him. He is beyond the margins of time, beyond anything that suggests containment, beyond frame. And one more poem that I wrote whilst I was working in a high security prison. It's Notes from a Prison Chapel. Sometimes when I'm waiting, the silence reminds me of when I was 13. Sunlight, holy water and incense, a dozen veils in a cardboard box, a candle flame in a small red glass. Pray that the light doesn't go out. It would mean the end of everything. I prayed, but it never did. I talked and ate sweets. I laughed at damnation. Endless flames were hard to imagine. Outside is a group of prisoners who can walk on water. The lino shines brilliantly in these corridors. They're grinning, tripping over laces. They could be kids, but for their voices. Football fans then, sons with their dads, out for a pint before the match starts. A group of workmates, a gang of lads. How many? Numbers are important in this Home Office establishment. Say 12. You won't easily forget good men and true, steps to recovery, the keys on a phone, bars on a gate, noon and midnight, stamps for your letters, the days of Christmas, the months, the years. And finally, a poem about another job I do. I'm no longer working in a prison, but as a writer in residence. But I work as a humanist celebrant, so I do funerals, weddings, and baby namings. And this poem is Grief's Beasts, which is kind of how I interpret grief, how I've experienced grief, how it feels to me. Grief's Beasts. Such faithfulness and loyalty in these barrel-bodied burrowers that come snouting for a place to rest. They're solid as armadillos and snuggly as bears. We feed them. We adjust their limbs to ease their sleep. We'll harbour a colony in our lifetime. We'll get used to their hammocked weight as they settle to a ballast. Why deny them now? Isn't love always a kind of grief.
From Prison to Education. Here is a poem by Merryn Williams.
First job. When the Open University opened, people said it could never work and was a mad idea. There were only 2 real universities anyhow. It was my first job and I was terrified. I got there, knowing no one. A field of mud surrounded lovely Walton Hall, the ancient church and cedars. Not far off emerged a new city, Milton Keynes. There was much that I had to learn fast. Then there was summer school, teaching the great English and Russian novels to students all older than myself. I stayed awake and heard them celebrating through the small hours. I agonized at the thought of public speaking. I didn't know how vast it would become, but I'm grateful for all the interesting people I met, the skills that I discovered. Thankful above all that the Open University taught me to write so as to be understood.
The next 2 poems could be said to be about creative work or the arts, so linked to poetry itself. First, Dinah Livingstone with a poem about working as a translator.
Likeness in difference. In Regent's Park, I hear the roar from the football field. In whatever language, the roaring sounds the same. Round St. Martin's Gardens, a mother walks with her 2 little ones, speaking a language I don't know. Could it be Bulgarian? But I do understand what she means when she calls one back who's gone too far, or picks up the other who falls and comforts him, just as a mother in English would call and console. Translating that German book was difficult. Huge compound words, interminable sentences whose clauses in unfamiliar order interwove. Verbatim it would sound ridiculous to us. I laboured to sort it out, untangle it like garden wire or wool with a will of its own. Sometimes I needed at least 3 new full stops. A few days later, rereading what I'd done, I was surprised the English sounded ordinary, a normal procedure, which is the same and not the same. Yet actually, I'm glad German is so German and French so French, that each language is so much itself, but using it is the same activity. As Wordsworth says, there is a peculiar pleasure from likeness in dissimilitude. In my garden, I enjoy herb robert, periwinkle, philadelphus, fuchsia, rose, all flowering. Goldfinch, blue tit, great tit, robin, wren come to my balcony, all being birds. Just ordinary living can be difficult, but here we are doing our best in London's 300 languages. In imagination, that translates into the city achieved and splendid, where Pancras and Kentish Town repose, the hungry are fed, distressed are comforted, all different kinds of humanity thrive, each enjoying, enriching each other, and all share the common good.
And now, on theatre, Roddy Maude-Roxby.
When the mask works. To wait in line with eyes closed to receive a mask. These are full masks with painted eyes. They do not speak. We see out through slits. Our first deep breath is theirs. We have disappeared. They are in play. They are other than us. When our emotions rise, they show in our bodies. The mask face seems to alter. When the mask pulls on a rope, what a change of expression. The masks touch their stomachs and hold out a hand. They are begging, said the Queen. The half-mask comes to the lip. They are the ones who speak. A girl aged 9 in such a mask became a dancing dervish, shouting, until mask off she tells us, I am the last person to do all that. I am a shy one. But now, if you give yourself permission, oh yes, and she leaps towards the audience.
And now, to the office. David Burridge gives us the trials of a negotiator.
A done deal. The table, the theatre thumps on a stretch of pine, picketed with flask and cups, no man's land between ranting arms and finger jabs. Down in the basement of knees, secret notes are passed. Derisory offer almost chair scrapes an end. Principles aired, realities faced, everyone agrees, better than a poke in the eye. Delegates assigned to storm out, grudge back again. A stubbing of fags signals closure, exhaled smog, hacks coughs, quells tempers, a grip of agreements threatened with tear-up, now briefcased for another year. Words penned for a quick show of hands, then backslaps and see you soons, the room empties grin after grin, until just the table, bare-faced, remains. Work-life balance. I've got to get the rhythm right, of fun and friends and sleep at night. Not too much to drain my spirit, that will never do now, will it? Feeling tense? Get to that gym, unravel muscles, nerve and skin. The business lost? Well, don't be bitter, at least you're feeling somewhat fitter. Yoga on the office floor, nirvana reached by 4:30. Who cares if sales are down? At least you're calmer, safe and sound. Work-life balance really sets a challenge. I've got to get the rhyming right, even if it takes all night. Office space. Once we all strove to be promoted into private offices, working spaces in which we could build our authority. Entry always took a polite knock, then permission shouted. Opinions swapped, confidentiality kept. We thrived in our closed-door meetings. Then open plan became the new ideology. Everything to be done, sharings, giggles and shouts. It's teamwork, they claimed, and made cost-saving sense. We were all regarded as equal ins and outs. As we bent our heads to tap in our thoughts, we always wondered who was leaning over us. A single sealed room was used for hard discussions. Those who slipped in then stormed out the street door. Now office space is emptying and laptops carried home. Workrooms are a zoom of bookshelves and swollen heads. Stay or leave, just a finger click. Employees' ideas are systems infected, shouted and snarled across the world. Face-to-face is now a deep fake. Real shared space is out of date.
Now, Jane Thomas with a sorry tale.
I used to work in advertising agencies in London when I was younger. It was an industry full of jargon and sometimes debauchery. This is a poem based on some of those experiences. Tom's affair with the famous ad man. He was older than him, a few decades maybe. Famous. He'd invented snap, crackle and pop. He had a light panelled party house in Hampstead. Wife and kids were out to graze in the chippings. He knew his way round the clubs, knew the owners from King's and the young geishas too. He wasn't as healthy or slim as he used to be, something to do with skiing in his left knee. Tom knew it was over when he went from Mac to B2B, realised the lines weren't new and that he had no USP. A USP is a unique selling point, and B2B is business to business marketing, which is seen as the lowest rung of marketing that you can do, whereas MAC is a high profile makeup brand that a lot of people would like to work on.
Who knew? Next, Helen Overell.
London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, TUC Centenary Occupational Health Department. She works late, has the office to herself, puts the finishing touches to the article, tidies her desk, trundles along the corridor. Electric hum of wheelchair, squeak of tyres. Reaches the stairwell where the antiquated lift wheezes behind the clang of metal grille doors. The daytime hubbub, flat-capped vowels, polished consonants, accents the world over, giving way to the rattle of galvanised buckets, swish of mops over well-trodden floors, good-natured banter, one woman to another, in lilt of down-to-earth, workaday Creole. The whole building resonant with words, talk as near to song as any she has heard. Deaf Services Team Meeting. One person only speaks or signs at any time. Everyone can see each other, no one in shadow. The interpreter keeps pace, dance of hands, clear speech. Portmanteau gestures carry whole phrases, names spelled out. Lip shape geometry deciphered, meaning shared. Faces scanned for puzzled frowns, for matters understood. Rumbled peal of thunder startles hearing colleagues. The deaf, bemused, ask a tumbled flurry of questions. The team leader, eyebrows raised, shapes air into what? Stamps his foot to call order, calm returns in moments. Someone points upwards, right-handed, draws a downward series of zigzags as though lightning strike. Thunderstorm. Minuted in shorthand, with tick list for fire drill, best practice minicom procedures, to be typed up.
Meg Barton describes the joys of commuting.
Journey to work. I'll not miss going to work, the jar of the alarm and the 10 more minutes and the oh God it's a 1:15 and the shower half asleep and the kettle on and the quick make your lunch, which is never enough, and the 5 more minutes and the flinging out the door in all weathers, and my own steady feet on the street and my bag hitched over my shoulder and the route that is always the route and the queue which is always the queue and the seat which is mine now. And the mist on the window, and the thinking of nothing, and the wanting to think of nothing, knowing you'll have to start thinking come 9, and the stop which is always the stop, and the 10 more minutes walking next to the carriageway, and the hedges sometimes in bloom, and the dash to the loo, and the wash your hands slowly, trying not to look older in the mirror, and 5 more minutes climbing the stairs, and the resistant swing door, and the stale office air, and the how long to go till it's time to go home.
Philip Pollecoff keeps us in the office with his first poem, but in the second we are out and about with his grandfather.
Poem for Emily on leaving Mary Curie to join Dogs Trust. No return for ours to those times of mirth, about the summer centurions in a legion, funnier in situ, and the answer's 60. I know, so unexpected. I saw this painting, the only blonde in the world, thought of you, the only Emily in the office, but that's not true. I know there are 25 more, all imposters I checked in Outlook. Your leaving proves that life is so compellingly unfair. Even if it's unfair for everyone, it is too unfairly so. Joining Dogs Trust half rhymes with keep in touch. All our exchanges over these years, in corridors and office kitchens, the odd pint ticking over in the rows of Mother Kelly's, and those flat-screen exec parades where I'd seek your approval for whatever I was saying, hardly amount to a weekend. What more is there to attraction, though, than finding the same things funny? Well, plenty. Even so, shared humour is a rare jewel. Yes, I'm comparing you to a rare jewel. What's the point of travelling to the office without people like you there? Without you there? Burning the world for others. Great Uncle Philip, you, a Russian Jew, selling matches door to door in 1908 around Bangor, until the people saw themselves in you and let you prosper. Though door to door means punched and spat in sun and rain, a slap and slam, lost in a gale for each doorway may bring women ragged in leather clogs, a chatty fellow, an angry man, an insult, a push or a sale. You daren't accept, if invited in case accused of theft. Each small movement of your limbs, each step and chill and turn away, and each pitch lets you place food on the table for Amelia, Izzy and Israel. How the Sabbath lights would have shone.
And now work that is hands-on and out and about with Carl Tomlinson.
Illuminated HSBC signs, Canary Wharf. From the ground their towering Times New Roman could pass for 14 point. But glimpsed from the Airbus this evening, they glare their monolith scale. They arrived at the factory in sections. Each part was a 4-man lift. I'm 6'3", and could walk through the H without it parting my hair. We painted the inner faces white to intensify the light, and sent them round the track again to spray the outsides black. And you might think that this far up nobody cares or knows if the line where the colours meet runs true or kinks a bit here and there. Not so. Chris spent hours cutting paper shrouds to just the right shape and fixing them with masking tape so the black did not seep through. Dwarfing bankers bent over screens, they advertise none of this making. Yet something of all that careful work shines back at me tonight.
And finally, Sarah Watkinson in a meditative poem about human work and earth work.
A song of thermodynamics. Blanched cords of couch grass tangle on the fork. Tread moulded casts of earth mess up the floor. Does order or disorder come from work? New sunbeams pick out cobwebs in each nook. The smallest must know what their toil is for. Blanched cords of couch grass tangle on my fork. What's entropy to spiders in the murk? For wood mice in the wainscot, what's a law? Does their or my disorder come from work? What's buried isn't dead, that's just our talk. Worms know that our remains are what life's for, and spongy touchwood crawls upon the fork. Earth loves decay,
Its microbes feed on muck, foul bags of bird shit, vegetable hair. Does order or disorder come from work? Roots live on captured sunshine in the dark. Wake up, smell the geosmin, petrichor. Fat couchgrass rhizomes come up on my fork. My order, their disorder. Human work.
And that's it for this episode. More information on poems and poets is available on poetryworthhearing.biz. I hope you've enjoyed listening.